I'd like to pay my respects to the Kaurna country that I stand on. Thank you for welcoming me here. I'd like to pay my respects to everybody in this room, all in one hit, because you're all equal to each other. You know, we live our days under the sun, no less equal, no more than who we are. I'd like to make special mention to Toto. He's just a great human being. I don't think there's much more than I can add than what has been said here tonight by that wealth of knowledge, by that lived experience of 3, 4 and 5 decades. But I'll note 3 different nutshells in the minutes that I've got at hand. The last 5 or 6 years, I've been a volunteer correspondent with the National Indigenous Times and the National Indigenous Radio Service. This came about because I was asked, because of my many travels, 7, 8, 9 months of the year, to the homelands, to communities right across this continent. I've probably been to more communities, homelands than what most people have. In Western Australia, if there are 282 communities, I've been to more than 100 of them. I've been to hundreds across the country. The more west we journey across this continent, the worse the hits on our First People, the more racist it gets. The statistical narrative speaks to that. I'm a researcher. I've spent my life in academic circles, but I've had enough of research. I've had enough of reports. Just as there's an industry of carpetbaggers lining, as Alison said, 22,000 bureaucrats in the Northern Territory. We'll take that into context. 22,000, the Northern Territory population's 250,000, 160,000 non-Aboriginal. That means 1 in 7 to 1 in 8 of all the non-Aboriginal population is a bureaucrat, servicing the needs of 1 in 4 of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander populations of the Northern Territory, the First Peoples. And I'll put it to you that an adult male living today in the Northern Territory, their life expectancy is still 52 years, 52 years. Now, the more west we travel across this continent, the worse all the statistics. And the statistical narrative is important. We do have to disaggregate. In this state, South Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, First People, are incarcerated at 2,400 per 100,000 population. You may not understand the numbers, but that's dramatic, because our Australian prison population is comprised of a rate, nationally, the trend of 150 per 100,000. But yet we incarcerate our First Peoples in this state at 2,400 per 100,000. That rises in the Northern Territory to 2,800. And in Western Australia, where I'm from, that rises to 3,700 per 100,000. 1 in 13 of all Aboriginal adult males in Western Australia is in prison today. 1 in 13. From a racialised lens, that is the highest jailing rate in the world. 8% of the Aboriginal adult male population, 8%, is in prison today in that state, in Western Australia. So we've got to see things from a racialised lens. This is, as Jeff alluded to, a great country in terms of public health. It is ranked 2nd in the world, behind Norway. It is the 12th largest economy, 2nd wealthiest nation per capita, highest median wages. Highest median wages in the world regionally are Western Australia, then the Northern Territory. Yet those 2 states, that state and territory, have the worst statistical narrative for our First Peoples. From a racialised lens, the worst in the world. The Kimberley, where I visit 2 or 3 months of the year, where most of our homelands are, the highest concentration, 46% of the population First Peoples. The Kimberley has a homeless rate, one of the highest in the world, yet it doesn't get a mention in mainstream media. 7% of the whole of the Kimberley is homeless, in one form of homelessness or another. 7% homeless outside natural disasters and civil strife. That is one of the world's worst homeless rates. Doesn't get much worse. I don't hold out the hope that everybody else holds out from what I've seen, but I fight the battle. I sit on government boards in mental health and suicide prevention. I'm part of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander suicide prevention projects. I work with Pat Dudgeon, Professor Pat Dudgeon, who many of you would know, because we want to make a difference. But you've got to be who you are 24/7. You can't be who you should be part of the time. Whether it's at the government level, or whether it's at the coalface or in academia or wherever, you've got to stand up and tell the story as it is. We weren't put on this earth to betray one another, but we do. We weren't put on this earth to bury our children, but we do. If we're going to make a difference, we have to do the difference as the lived experience, day in, day out. Say it as it is, wherever it may be. And this is one reason I undertook the extra work, not that I don't have enough on my plate, of writing for the National Indigenous Times for 5 or 6 years, 15, 16 stories a week, because that's the narrative that's actually out there that's untold. For all the stories I wrote, for all the voices I brought out from the homelands, the communities from around the country, there were scores I couldn't. There were scores that broke my heart, because the tragedy is huge, but it was an opportunity for the psychosocial, for healing, for venting, for saying your piece. It all helps, and it adds to the story, and sometimes we cultivate difference, and we can work with other good people, whether it's in the media, whether it's in government, to make a difference. But I used also the National Indigenous Times to write 200 articles on suicide, the suicide crisis, to cultivate that into the national media and the mainstream, and to leverage change from government in responses. And yes, despite what's actually happening at the forefront, behind the scenes, we are doing many things, but we've got a long journey, and it's still piecemeal. We all have to step up to the plate. We all have to step up and get feet on the ground. Feet on the ground, whether it's at the rallies, whether it's in forums, take these forums across the country, replicate them, live stream them, take them out. We've got to go for a cultural shift. Without that cultural shift, our days under the sun are misspent. Our meaning is diminished in who we are and who we should be to one another. It's why I've stood alongside my Aboriginal brothers and sisters for 3.5 decades, because my father, as a young person, as a migrant, once said to me, the racism that we were born into, the racism that you are born into, my son, that you feel day in, day out because of the colour of your skin in this country, because of the way we come across, it pales into insignificance to that of our brothers and sisters, our First Peoples. Until we get it right for them, or they are allowed to get it right in the ways it should be, we have got it right for no one in this country, for no one. It can't be that the Kimberley has the highest suicide rate in the world from a racialised lens of our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, but it is. It is, in this 12th largest economy on the planet, second wealthiest nation per capita. The far north Queensland in a similar position, the world's highest suicide rates from a racialised lens. 4 years ago, I wrote a story in the National Indigenous Times. It came from my government insiders, from the ministers I mix it with. They spoke to me about 180 communities, homelands in Western Australia, that there was a list for them to be closed, to amalgamate them into larger towns, or to rid them off the country, that the First Peoples of the Western Desert, of the Gascoyne, of the Murchison, of parts of the Kimberley, of the Pilbara, to rid them off that country, to make it easier for the miners, the developers, the commercial interests, the neoliberal project that Jeff was referring to. I broke that story 4.5 years ago in the National Indigenous Times, but it didn't rate much of a mention. It was fobbed off. The government said there is no such list. There is no such list. And that your sources and insiders are conspiratorial and fanciful. I knew there was a list, and I pursued that story and kept on going on with it and kept on trying to cultivate the media to carry it out. Late last year, that story flared up again because of a municipal bill, but that's sleight of hand. That is what it was never about. I'll put it this way. Our federal government, our Commonwealth, has long held an agenda of assimilation. But as I said a little bit earlier, the more west we go across this country, the worse it gets for our First Peoples. Western Australia is a very insular place. Mining is this whole bit. For them, it's not about assimilation. Assimilation is a tool for exploitation. What they want to do is clear the vast interior and the top end, for the miners, the developers, the commercial interests. They want people off-country to tap into that ore, the minerals, and also the uranium that's there. There are now 4 sites slated for uranium mining in Western Australia: Ghillar, Wiluna, Kintyre and Mulga, most of it on Martu country. For them, it is controversial to have people on country near uranium mines and the sickness that will come with it, because nowhere are the baseline levels of radiation ever kept to what they should be wherever there is uranium mining. They know that the future of Western Australia is 30 uranium mines to feed an industry that is fast coming. We have 400 nuclear reactors around the world, 200 more on their way. By 2100 it is estimated that we will have 1,000. Australia is already into deals with the rest of the world to export high-grade uranium, and 40% of the world's accessible high-grade uranium is in Western Australia, and then there's also the Northern Territory. This is what it's actually all about, and this is a story that's not being carried out by the mainstream media. It is not about what has been said, a municipal bill. That's rubbish. That's pittance what that whole thing was about. $90 million annual to run 282 communities, homelands, and in South Australia, $10 million annual for 100 communities. That's pittance, that's nothing. The language we must stick to is not one of consultation. We've got to be careful not to transition into language that we must be consulted about our communities, our homelands. Who closes down someone's place of origin? Who closes down someone's homeland, where someone came from? Yes, there is natural attrition, and places are not what they once were, but let that be in that manner and way, natural attrition, and let these homelands remain so people can go back to their place of origin, or children and grandchildren to where their heritage is from. Why should that be denied to them in 2015 or in 2020 or 2030 or 2050? That should never be the case. The waves of migrants that came to this country do go back to their villages and their towns. However, whether there are services there or not, that's natural attrition, but those villages, towns, their buildings, their homes are there. How can we go raising the homelands? Bulgari, 62 houses. 62 houses were raised in November. And it is not just in Bulgari. It's been going on for a long time. Kanana, outside of Kalgoorlie, it has been starved of services for years. The people are living under corrugated iron in shanty towns at Ningamaya, outside Kalgoorlie. Port Hedland is surrounded by shanty towns and tent cities. And I mention Port Hedland because it's the busiest port in Australia for the mining boom, Native title is not the answer either. 340 federal court determinations, 1,000 ILUAs, and as Jeff said, I have not seen any community holistically benefit. There are communities that bring in tens and hundreds of millions of dollars from native title, and they represent 1,500, 2,000 people, yet they live impoverished. They live impoverished. The Martu have not benefited. The Gumala have not benefited. The Yinjabandi have not benefited. It's the same story right across the country. The story that we're not chasing is one about social health. It is one about racialisation and racism. The homelands may be poor and may be impoverished, many of them. That is not of their making. That is not of their making. It is governments for 20, 30, 40 years who have degraded these communities, who have denied them the equivalency of services, infrastructure and opportunity, social health, equivalent to the non-Aboriginal communities, to what Jeff said and others have said that we all enjoy. We have degraded these communities. Jigalong begged for 15 years for clean water. 15 years for clean water, yet it is right near the mining towns, the mining boom. In Western Australia, the majority of the homelands have had to beg for the upgrade and upkeep of their water tanks, for pipelines, for power lines, and many of them have been rejected these. That is degradation, and that is degradation from a racialized perspective. That is racism. Until we actually get up and say what the actual issue is, one of social health, one of opportunity, one of equal access, one of addressing the inequalities, we will never reach solutions. We will never get to outcomes. We will continue to betray one another in our days under the sun. We will continue to bury our children. And for me, who works in suicide, who works in trying to prevent it, who works at the coalface and at the government level, it breaks my heart to bury an 11-year-old, to bury a 12-year-old, to bury a 13-year-old, to bury a 14-year-old, to bury a 15-year-old, to bury a 16-year-old, to bury a 17-year-old, to bury an 18-year-old, because each of those ages, I have been to a funeral where we have buried someone who should have gone on to do much more in life, The solutions are equality. The solutions are the call for it. The solutions are to step up. The solutions are to speak out. The solutions are to believe that we can make that difference from whatever level or from wherever we are in whatever way we can, because it'll happen no how else. And if we don't do that, things will just get worse. As I said, 1 in 13 of all our Aboriginal and adult males in Western Australia are in prison. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. The trends have shown that year in, year out. I've had enough of research. I've had enough of reports. I've packed them all away, and I work at the coalface, and I've been trying to push that there is no greater legacy that we can have than to improve the lot of others to the point that we save lives. In the Kimberley, 1 in every 3 of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander males of our First People will be dead by the age of 45. Unnatural, premature deaths and suicides. Suicide is so dramatic in the taking of life in this country, in this high-income, socially wealthy, powerfully public health nation, that it officially takes 1 in 20 of every Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. Suicide takes 1 in 20. My research says 1 in 10. 1 in 10. Once again, that is the world's most horrific rate from a racialised lens. Look, I'll wrap it up with this. We can win this. We can win this. I'm not a believer in rallies around the clock, but I am a believer in standing up, in feet on the ground. But what I do believe in is in sustaining the coverage, in chasing down the justice. The rallies that have lifted the nation's spirits and the spirits of the people in the homelands, yes, they are of an immense value. Yes, tens of thousands have come out. We need to keep that going. What we did in March 19, what we did again on May 1, we will be doing again in June with another suite of rallies. We've gone from 30 rallies around the country and the world to 85 at the last count. We'll go to 150 at the next one. People are coming together and at the fore. But the homelands are not protected. The agenda is still there, and it is always one of attrition of how to betray your fellow person, your fellow human being. And we do need to keep up and at it, and we do need to come together in numbers and in any other innovative way that will come to mind. And we do need to make a difference, because in the end, who depends on it? We as human beings, each and every one of us. We're all under this earth, under the one sun, and we need to fight this battle together to the end of days or to our last breath. Much respect.